This is a reading from Modern Saints by Anne Ball. 27. Laura Vicuna. Servant of God Laura Vicuna. Born 1891, died 1904 in Chile. Born in Chile, died in Argentina at the age of 13. Laura lived in a society where, as today, many couples lived together in sin. Only 13 years old at her death, from an early age she knew and understood the type of existence her mother was living. Realizing the near impossibility of drawing her mother away from these bonds, she willingly offered her life to God for this intention. When her mother's lover made repeated advances to Laura, this courageous child defended her own purity with the fortitude of the early Christian martyrs. Laura was born in Santiago, Chile, on April 5th of 1891. Her father was a soldier who belonged to a noble Chilean family. A revolution and civil war had broken out the previous January, and Señor Vicuna carried his wife Mercedes and his infant daughter into political exile into the Andes Mountains. Shortly before Laura's third birthday, and after the birth of her baby sister Julia, Señor Vicuna died, leaving his widow to care for the children. Mercedes took the girls to the frontier town of Las Lajas, where she hoped to find work as a cook and laundry woman. Here she met Manuel Mora, owner of a large hacienda or ranch. Señor Mora offered to be her protector, and his financial support would pay tuition for the girls at the newly formed missionary school run by the Salesian Sisters, Daughters of Mary, Help of Christians. In return for this help and protection, Mercedes became his mistress. When Laura was 8, Mercedes, on the advice of one of the Salesian missionary priests, took both girls to board at the school in Junin. Life at the school was very pleasant. Here, Laura learned about God and his love and learned to repay this love with love for her fellow students and the sisters. Laura was a leader in sports and a friend to all. She helped the younger children with their daily tasks, such as making their beds, and with their personal chores, such as combing their hair or mending their clothes. She acted as a peacemaker for the children's quarrels. When her little sister Julia was naughty, Laura gently corrected her. Laura was looked up to by all. She was serious and wise beyond her age. She had a mature understanding of prayer, and because she was a natural leader, she seemed to build up a joyful spirit of piety in all her fellow students. On her first summer vacation, Laura began to realize the type of life her mother was leading. In addition, Señor Mora was often drunk. At these times, he would attempt to embrace and kiss Laura, who was repelled by his advances and his whiskey-laden breath. Laura's mother demanded that he leave the child alone, which he did except when he was drunk. At these times, Laura made every effort to keep out of his way. Laura made her first communion when she was 10. Mercedes came to Junin for the festive occasion, but Laura noticed that her mother did not receive the sacrament. She seemed to realize that her mother was not happy. One of her constant prayers before the tabernacle became, "Jesus, I wish that Mama would know you better and be happy." Laura was fascinated by the devotion of the sisters. They had courageously left their home countries to dedicate their lives to the service of God in the missions. Laura secretly hoped one day to follow their example and become a sister herself. She said, "I want to do all I can to make God known and loved." She prayed, "My God, I want to love and serve you all my life." When Laura was 11, Bishop John Calleiro made a visit to the school. Laura asked him if she could become a Salesian sister. Laughingly, he replied, "Just wait a little longer, child." But Laura did not want to wait. Repeatedly, she asked her confessor to pray and ask God if it was his will for her to become a Salesian. This understanding priest agreed that she did, in truth, have a religious vocation, but it remained their secret. In the summer of 1901, Laura again returned to the ranch for summer vacation. Señor Mora seemed more than ever to be becoming quite interested in her, fawning and fussing over her. Through prayer and vigilance, she determined to protect her purity. "Lord, do not let me offend you," she prayed. One day, the moment she had feared finally arrived. She was caught alone with Señor Mora. He began to make improper advances, and she struggled ferociously, finally breaking away and running outdoors. She knew, however, that he would not give up, and that at a fiesta, a few days later, he approached her and asked her for a dance. Laura flatly refused in spite of Señor Mora's threats and her mother's entreaties. Laura spent that night hiding outside in the dark, while Signor Mora vented his anger on her hapless mother. For revenge, he refused to continue paying Laura's tuition at school, but the sisters heard of the matter and offered to accept the girls free. Embarrassed at this charitable offer, Mercedes sent only Laura back to school, keeping Julia at home with herself. At Easter 1902, Laura was confirmed by Bishop Caliero. She realized she had not offered the supreme sacrifice for her mother and begged her confessor to be allowed to offer her life to God for her mother's conversion. Realizing that he was dealing with a person who had been given great spiritual gifts, the priest granted her request. During the winter of 1903, Laura became ill. Her mother begged her to come home with her, and the superior told Laura, "Your mother needs you more than you need her. You must go." At the ranch, Laura's health steadily worsened. Instead of improving with the better climate and good care, she felt that her offering had been accepted and did not believe she would ever get well. At first, Signor Mora stayed out on the range most of the time, but when he returned, Laura noticed that he had cooled towards her mother, and especially when drunk, he looked at Laura with a strange desire. Mercedes also noticed his attitude, and in spite of his threats, she packed up with the girls and rented a small place in Junin. On the night of January 14th in 1904, Signor Mora, drunk with whiskey, anger, and lust, rode into town and announced his intention of spending the night at the cottage where Mercedes and the girls were staying. Whip in hand, he demanded that Mercedes accede to his wishes and that his family return the following day to the ranch with him. Though weak and pale, Laura resolutely announced, "If he stays, I will go." She did not wait for an answer, but walked out the door. Signor Mora was furious. He followed her outside, and Mercedes screamed for Laura to run. Laura attempted to run for safety to the sister's residence, but Signor Mora caught her in the street. He whipped her and kicked her as she lay in the street, crying for help. When some men ran out of nearby houses, Mora picked the girl up and tried to put her across his horse. Then, realizing the danger, tossed her back into the street and rode away. Laura had been beaten unconscious. She lingered for a week as her mother and the sisters kept watch over her. She finally revealed her secret. "Mama, I'm dying, but I'm happy to offer my life for you. I asked our Lord for this." Mercedes fell to her knees, sobbing. She realized what her daughter meant and begged Laura's forgiveness as well as the forgiveness of God. She promised to begin her life again. After Laura's death at about 6 o'clock on the evening of January 22nd, 1904, Mercedes went to the chapel to make her confession. Through the witness of her courageous daughter, she returned to the practice of the faith. The diocesan process for the cause of beatification of Laura Vicuna was opened on September 19th, 1955. This is her. The caption reads, Laura Vicuna offered her life to God to convert her mother from a life of concubinage. Laura was murdered at age 13 by her mother's paramour. On the day of Laura's death, her mother returned to the practice of the faith.